Now, for more on this, I'm joined by Drew Fagan. He has years of experience working in leadership positions with the federal and provincial governments and is currently a senior advisor at public affairs firm McMillan Vantage. Drew, how do you imagine a phone call between Donald Trump and Mark Carney going?
Well, I guess the first question would be, when does it take place? Does it take place after April 2nd? Quite possibly it'll take place now before April 2nd. That's 6 days away. In which case, after the pleasantries, I would expect that the Prime Minister would make the point that he made on that clip with regard to sovereignty, basically say in a nice way, knock it off with regard to talk of annexation, and let's get down to a conversation. It may even come to some sort of high-level negotiation on what actually gets imposed, or at least an understanding of what Trump plans to do on April 2nd. There's lots of questions about that, and what the retaliation plans of the Prime Minister might be. I would hope that a conversation takes place before April 2nd, kind of build a little bit of a relationship between the two of them, which is hard with the president, and then set things up a little bit for April 2nd. Maybe it would be helpful.
Yeah, it certainly seems like they'd have a lot to talk about before April 2nd. Carney wouldn't tip his hat today about how he would retaliate, and perhaps, as you suggest, he wants to hold on to that until we're closer to the date. What tools are on the table for him? How do you see him responding to Trump?
We have applied retaliatory tariffs on a small amount of American goods based on the action the Americans took a couple of weeks ago with regard to our steel and aluminum exports to the United States. We've also said if the Americans act in a much bigger way, which sounds like it might happen on April 2nd, but it's still hard to know, that we have other tariff plans in place. In fact, we've announced some of them. So the plan had been to announce tariffs about 4 times the size of what have already been applied. Mostly consumer goods and things like that, calculated to hit Republican states, sensitive political states in the United States. We'll see, based on April 2nd, what actually the Canadian government decides to do in retaliation. As you heard, the Prime Minister, the Liberal leader, has promised something that's appropriate.
Ford kind of hinted that perhaps an exemption for Ontario could be on the table. What do you think the chances of that are?
It's interesting what's going on. So with regard to auto, which was a fundamental negotiation, a fundamental aspect of bilateral trade going back to the 1960s, really the first integrated industry between the two countries. During the NAFTA renegotiation, Trump tried to get rules of trade that essentially said you needed to produce a certain amount in the United States to get free access to the United States. We, or Canadians and Mexican production, we managed to ensure that the standard was North American, that we would work, the 3 of us together. Other countries wouldn't have the same access, particularly assuming you didn't have much North American production, but we, the 3 of us, would share. What's happening here is that he is trying to set a standard for American production. That's still a problem for us in terms of the sensibility of a North American marketplace, but it is progress, and there is a signal being sent here that if there are tariffs on autos, and there may well be, at least for a short period, they'll be lower than what others face, such as Europeans.